At least the debate part's over, right?
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
You know, we should talk about the exasperation that everybody allegedly feels about this presidential race. I mean, I certainly do feel it. But there is an ambulance chasing aspect to this whole thing that we really ought to factor into the psychology and analysis of the presidential race. And I've got two terrific guys back to do that with us tonight. Welcome in. Yes, debate number 3 is in the books, and we're only a couple of 3 weeks away here from November 8th, and most of you say it can't come soon enough. We'll talk about that too. Here are some of the headlines that are dominating the conversation today. Of course, Trump won't say if he'll accept the election results. And another one, the attack on the election and the integrity of the election reverberates. I mean, these are all predictable. Third debate, won't commit to accepting election if he loses. In fact, interestingly enough, Lexi didn't pull this one up. She usually likes to pull up the Providence Journal. Headline today, horrifying Hillary Clinton's response. I immediately tweeted out last night, game, set, match, it's over. Not because I was horrified, because I just thought, God, how stupid. Here's a summary, and then we'll bring on our fine experts.
Are you saying you're not prepared now to commit to that principle?
What I'm saying is that I will tell you at the time. I'll keep you in suspense.
Donald Trump would not promise to accept the results of the presidential election, challenging the tradition of a peaceful transfer of power.
I'm not looking at anything now. I'll look at it at the time.
That's horrifying. You know, every time Donald thinks things are not going in his direction, he claims whatever it is rigged against him.
After the debate, Trump's campaign manager and running mate said the GOP nominee will reserve judgment until all votes are cast.
He has the prerogative to wait and see how the election comes out.
Absent widespread fraud and irregularities, then, we'll see.
On the debate stage, Trump again denied numerous allegations of sexual assault.
Those stories are all totally false. I have to say that. I think they want either fame or her campaign did it. And I think it's her campaign.
Clinton said Trump's answer revealed his true character.
Donald thinks belittling women makes him bigger. He goes after their dignity, their self-worth, and I don't think there is a woman anywhere who doesn't know what that feels like.
Quoting from stolen private emails, Trump accused Clinton of wanting to weaken border security. Clinton said the bigger issue was Russian espionage.
Will Donald Trump admit and condemn that the Russians are doing this?
That was a great pivot off the fact that she wants open borders, okay? How did we get on to Putin?
Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
It's pretty clear you won't admit that the Russians have engaged.
The puppet show was one of the few edgy clashes. Pithy one-liners at times stole the night.
He started tweeting that the Emmys were rigged against him.
Should have gotten it.
Several Republicans we talked to afterwards gave Trump solid marks for his debate performance. They said they weren't sure that Trump did enough to win this election last night, but he may have done enough to keep it close.
Wow. Joe Fleming needs no introduction. Our top pollster here in the state, Noel Rubinton, our freelance journalist and terrific, quiet mind on this. Always has a kind of a subtle, think about it approach. Welcome, gentlemen. Again, thank you. Joe, you kind of whispered to me here as I was running that he was doing well up until the puppet. No, you're a puppet. No, you're a puppet. No, you're a puppet.
I really felt that
puppet.
At the beginning of the debate, Donald Trump had what he wanted. He had the questions he wanted. Immigration, gun control, abortion, Supreme Court issues Donald Trump could get his base regenerated with and really start to expand himself. Then Hillary Clinton turned it to Russia, and Donald Trump went with the puppets. He reverted back to his old ways. And I really think that, hurt Donald Trump in the debate last night. At that point on, I think Donald Trump started to lose the debate. Up to then, I thought Donald Trump was doing very well.
Well, is it a question of stamina, the word he's been throwing at Hillary Clinton all this time? I think we've seen after 3 debates that he loses steam in these events.
I think it's a question of preparation. I mean, allegedly he
Aren't
did some
they
more
tied together, sort of?
I guess they are, but I mean, Hillary Clinton's preparation was just incredible last night. What she pulled off on him when she talked about him choking with the Mexican president, when she talked about that line that you just showed about The Apprentice. I mean, she was ready. She obviously prepared her material and was really going to get under his skin. And he really never did the same with her.
Oh, absolutely. You're totally correct, especially like the part with the rigged. She had all those past historical dates where he claimed things were rigged all the way along, and he even said about the Emmys.
Right.
You know, I think that shows she was well prepared
And he
for this
took
debate,
the
and he's not.
bait and said should have won it.
Right. He does that a lot, and that's what that was her goal last night, to get him to take the debate again, like he did in the first debate. It worked. In the second debate, not as much because it was a different format. But in this debate, Donald Trump, after about 40 minutes, once again reverted back to Donald Trump.
There's this fine line that we always tread when it comes to debate analysis, whether you're a voter doing your own analysis or pundits doing theirs. And that is instinctively separating content, concept, policy from style and tactical points in a debate. And that which we are talking about right now is much more tactical conversation. It is clear that, and it's always been kind of accepted, that part of debate prep is to be tactically prepared to go at it. And he just seemed to be obstinate through the debate season not to tactically prepare. Yes.
But I think you're right. But remember now, he had all the debates in the primaries, but it never was one-on-one. It was 17 people, 15 people, 5 people. He always had multiple people, so he was able to step back and not always be in the limelight. Now he has to be. And you're right, he wasn't prepared for it. He really should have set himself up to be prepared for this debate. He should have taken time to prep. I mean, you were talking to 70 million people last night. You should have taken 3 days like Hillary Clinton did and be well prepared. It was your one last shot
But it was the
to
third
get to the
time
voters.
that I mean, time one, big criticism, not well prepared.
Right.
Second debate, he's applauded for his offensive stance, but he starts to wander on the stage, his brain starts to wander. 35, 40 minutes in, puppet, and the whole thing starts to fall
But to
apart.
use another favorite word from this time around, it's also temperament. I mean, Hillary Clinton, this is what she does. She had these set pieces last night. She commanded the stage, and she, on abortion, on some other subjects, she talked for probably almost a minute and a half straight, and he was just, with his usual sound bites. But she put out her policies, he didn't.
I have to assume his advisors told him to practice, prep for these debates. He just didn't want to listen, because I have to assume he has good people around him who know how to do these things. He just didn't listen to what he was told.
All right, so the big thing, I mean, I immediately tweeted out game, set, match after, he made the comment that generates all the headlines. Production time being what it is for the Thursday program, we produced this show prior to radio, believe it or not, at 1:30 in the afternoon, and I saw Donald Trump in his Ohio rally. My guest did not, I informed him, but I'll tell you again, we don't have the video is what my point is. But I guess we do have one quick headline on this. Do we have that, Jess? You're asking me which one it is? It's show, Lex. Little team spirit here. There we go. Donald Trump says he'll totally accept the results of the presidential election if I win. Now, if you read that Bloomberg headline without context, you'll believe that he's completely gone off his rocker. That's not a double down. That's like slamming your head against your own cement wall. It was received as I gasped, but then he kind of stepped back and said, you could tell that he thought that was funny. Well, even joking about this at this point is high risk.
Very.
But later he explained, as his surrogates did after the debate, that yes, in lieu of anything that is legally challengeable, he'll accept the results of the election.
Once again, he's created an issue out of nowhere.
For what?
He's not running on the unrigged election platform.
They're not talking about Hillary Clinton today, about the Clinton Foundation, where I thought he made some inroads last night.
Right.
They're talking about this. They're not talking about her emails. They're talking about this. Donald Trump is his own worst enemy at this point. He could have been talking about Clinton's problems, but no, we're talking about Donald Trump. That's not what you want when you're behind in the polls. You've got to get the issue on her, and he's not doing that.
Yeah, he's the pollster, right? This is the guy. This is because you must be going nuts, just in terms of the sport of politics, because you often will consult your clients on exactly what it is that is the pulse of the people, the trigger thought.
Absolutely.
In fact, you and I have had some friendly debates and adversarial discussions sometimes when I think that you are too I don't know, categorical or cliche-driven or thematic, kind of rigid in your
Captain the
analysis.
obvious.
Well, yeah, but no, but you know what I mean.
Right.
But I've come to learn, Joe, that is the magic of what you do. You think that way, you advise that way, because the data tells you to be that way.
Exactly.
The pollsters have got to be looking at him going, and Kellyanne Conway is a pollster / consultant, and say, Donald, understand, that doesn't help you. She has to have been doing that.
I have to strongly believe that. As you say, she's a pollster, she's a campaign consultant. She knows what to do. She knows how to win campaigns. But in turn, he's just not listening, I have to believe. I think he's getting advice. He had some good people around him. But he's not taking their advice.
You think there's a closed circuit camera that we're eventually going to get to see down the line in some frontline piece, in a year or so, of Kellyanne Conway yelling some expletive deleted and throwing something against the wall when she sees this? I would have loved to have been in the huddle with them in their private viewing area, I'm sure, to be able to just go, oh my God, because they all ran out and try to repeat what they were saying prior. I mean, 30 minutes before, the vice presidential nominee was saying, of course we'll accept the election, right? I mean,
she signed up for this, right?
Right. Well, I hope the check clears.
So
seriously.
Either she thought she was going to save him from this, or she said, it'll be a great experience anyway.
There's nothing worse for a pollster to say to the client, here's a path to victory. Follow this path. And they say, no, I don't want to do that. That's not going to work. I'm going to do this. And you're basing it on data, on how people tell you they view certain things. And Donald, I really believe, isn't listening. Because both of them had high negatives, but as I said earlier, her negatives have been entrenched for 25 years. If he came across as more presidential, I think a lot of those undecided voters would have went right over to him.
But I mean, I think we should give him some credit. He really believes this.
Believes what?
That the election is rigged and that people won't let him win. And he also believes that people support him for that belief. So it may be a crazy idea.
I think people do support it.
He
There's a 40% of the electorate that does support it.
It goes back to what Joe is saying. He has a poll going on in his head which tells him that this is successful.
If the polls showed him ahead and he lost on election day, maybe the elections were rigged. But the polls are showing him behind. Is he saying the polls are all rigged too? Because they're really not. They're the polls taking a snapshot of the picture out there right now. The snapshot is he's losing. So if you lose an election day, how can you say they were rigged when the numbers were showing all along you were going down?
When we come back, we'll talk about the down ballot challenge. Because what if Marco Rubio, say in Florida, wins and Donald Trump loses and Donald Trump's yelling rigged? What happens then? Stay with us.
John Podesta said some horrible things about you, and boy, was he right.
My Social Security payroll contribution will go up, as will Donald's, assuming he can't figure out how to get out of it. But what we want to do is to replenish the Social Security Trust Fund.
Yes.
Do you notice he never used her name last night? Never once. It was her, she.
He didn't say Hillary?
Really?
Never. Through the entire debate. And then comes that line, what a nasty woman. It was such a...
And Joe would be sitting there saying, Donald, suburban women, it's where the data is.
Right.
And then that.
He's getting buried among the suburban women. He's down by 20 points with women. He can't win the election when you're down by 20 points with female voters.
And I can't believe some of the surrogates, like the Jim Bennett, what a phony he is, the conservative. Of course he finds a play on spot. Well, she is nasty, and she is a woman. Well, guess what? No one ever says nasty man. No, I mean, if we're gonna be in the gender politics game, can we at least understand what the social rules are? I say you're nasty. Or I wouldn't say nasty man. Right. So, God, what a it is absolutely amazing. All right, what happens with this with this narrative about voter problems and voter fraud? Earlier today, he also talked about millions of folks on the rolls that shouldn't be, and 1 million plus people who have passed away are still on the rolls. That doesn't mean they come out to vote. Right. And he cited one case, and he said one even switched party affiliation. Well, of course there are scattered attempts to screw with the election.
Well,
but the number of real versus the number of potential is minuscule, is it not?
I really think it is. I mean, when somebody passes away, the local board of canvassers has to remove them. If they're not on top of getting the people off the rolls, they may stay on there for a number of years. People move from one state to another state. They register in the new state, but they're not taking off the old state's rolls. So you got people on those rolls who never has any intention of voting.
And never does.
Right. Show me where they have voted. That's the difference.
Right.
I mean, in Rhode Island, you got voter ID now. So how do you go in there and say you're somebody else without a picture ID?
Now, look, I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I mean, for years, I supported the voter ID thing, and I didn't buy the arguments that someone couldn't play a game. But the truth is, the data has not borne out that there's any of that kind of stuff really going on here. So he has melded his feeling about what the media has done to him and his potential for voter fraud with this data, right?
Right. So he's just saying everybody's against me. When he was
doesn't
ahead,
matter the details.
Right. But it's his shtick.
In the primary, the media was his friend.
Right.
They helped create him. The media loved him. He did all sorts of interviews all the time.
Who has had more unfiltered television time in an election of any kind than Donald Trump?
But as soon as it goes away, it's rigged. They're against me. But he had all that free time and a lot of positive time early on.
But even now, he still gets unfiltered time to be able to turn things around, change the narrative, change the conversation.
I mean, he's based his campaign on it with not running ads. He's basically said, I don't need ads. I'm going to take the free media.
So it brings me to this final question just on his strategies. Then we'll talk about some of the issues and this other person in the race, Hillary Clinton. It is amazing that we sit here and we just dwell on this guy. And he just has given the race to a very damaged candidate who did, I admit, look last night, papal or presidential, I'm not sure which. That whole white outfit was very kind of confusing to me. Joe, is there a chance that the data is really bad? Is there a chance that he actually is in better shape than your national comrades suggest?
You're basically saying people are lying when they're doing these
No,
surveys.
I don't even know what the premise would be of the question.
Right.
Is there a chance
they're afraid to say they're voting for Donald Trump, but they're really going in there to vote for Donald Trump.
I don't know what the reason is. Is there a chance that the output is not correct?
I will be surprised because there's so many polls being done nowadays. It's not like 30 or 40 years ago. You only had a couple polls. There's polls every day, and they're all showing the same thing. Plus, again, this is a 50-state election, and we're looking at all the polls in each of these states. And they're all pretty consistent, all within a couple points of each other. I would be very surprised.
I agree. I mean, there's so many confirmations, and you have now states like Arizona in play. It's just, listen, anything could have happened this year. This has been a bizarre year, but it would be incredible.
Well, it's just enigmatic type of aspect to the race, him just destroying the Republican opponents all the way down to the primary, that almost gives you this outer space feeling about it, that nothing that is historic or practical is applicable. And what if we're all being fooled because this guy has changed the circuitry of the universe? You know what I'm saying? There's that back of everyone's mind going, you know what, November 9th will prove it, but I'm not sure
Think
he's
about
out.
this. The Republicans are running away from him. You know, his own party members, senators,
well, a 3-week
sprint
sprint away is hardly credible to voters, I would think, right?
No, right. No, I agree. But I'm just saying his own party, where you would think they'd be rallying around him, are running away. So that's why I have to believe the polling data.
Well, Rubio, I thought, was really a high level yesterday when he said, hey, listen, I'm paraphrasing. This whole WikiLeaks thing, can we check into ourselves here? It's Russia that has intervened into this political process. And, the messenger matters here. Well, you'd think WikiLeaks was a subsidiary of the Trump campaign right now, but Rubio, I think, has been able to separate himself. What if Donald Trump loses in Florida, claims this thing is rigged, Rubio wins? What does Rubio do as a sitting U.S. senator? I mean, the conflict of that is incredible, don't you think?
Absolutely. No, I mean, it's a very insidious kind of idea.
You think it'll be irrelevant that if he loses and he claims it's problematic and there's really no substantive data to prove it, that everyone would just kind of go, enough.
I think you have to be close enough.
Right.
I mean, for him to claim that his situation is like Al Gore's, I think is a little far-fetched. Yeah. I mean, that was really close, and there was a recount triggered.
The Republican Secretary of State set the legal process for the recounts. Who in their right common sense mind wouldn't think that there should not have been a recount in Florida?
Out of millions of votes, 1,700 votes to start or less.
And by the way, that was after the election results came in, not predicting that they'll go foul. It's unbelievable. All right.
No, I mean, I think at this point, Donald Trump has major problems because a lot of states, like you just mentioned, Arizona, states that should be solidly red right now are just a light pink because he could lose some of those states.
What we see in the next 2 or 3 weeks, they show. Tell us all.
Getting rid of any violent person, anybody who should be deported, we should deport them. When it comes to the wall that Donald talks about building, he went to Mexico, he had a meeting with the Mexican president, didn't even raise it, he choked, and then got into a Twitter war because the Mexican president said, we're not paying for that wall.
First of all, I had a very good meeting with the president of Mexico, very nice man. We will be doing very much better with Mexico on trade deals, believe me.
She was well prepared. This is that's the piece of audio that you wanted to see there. Give her credit. I mean, in terms of performance, presidentiality, all that, A's.
And that's what she had to do last night.
I don't
She
like
did
her
what she had to do.
policies on X number of levels, and I can't vote for her either. But you got to see the distinction between.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, her Supreme Court discussion, I think, is way inflated in terms of. Well, we need a whole Supreme Court analysis. Do you have a thought on the Supreme Court, the abortion discussions that she had, some of the more substantial early debate?
I just think it shows a lot of reasoned thinking, even if you disagree with her.
Correct.
It's somebody who's like worked it through, and with him, it still comes across as very garbled. And he has some positions that appeal to a lot of people, but they're not kind of worked through. I think that's...
Is it because, and you poll Americans all the time, Southern New Englanders, is it because we're garbled? That in general, the American public is garbled?
Well, American public likes to see things in 30-second sound bites. You know, and Donald played to that, but it's not a big enough audience. He needs to expand and give more meat on what he's talking about, and he's never done that. So all he's doing is giving the gobble.
There's going to be more Democrats have been poisoning my rallies. Democrats are working with networks to cook debates. All the rigging is going to go on. We're going to have another 3 weeks of rigging.
Right.
Can he pull this out?
The path to victory is very, very, very narrow at this point. I mean, states that should be solid red, Texas, Utah, Arizona, those are states that are in play right now. I think in the end they may stay Republican, or at least 2 out of 3 of them. But if you're spending time there, how do you spend time in the battleground states? Very difficult to pull it out at this point for Donald Trump, unless they could turn the whole campaign back to Hillary Clinton and her problems.
What does she do for the next 3 weeks?
I think she probably plays it safe, because I think the only real risk she runs is that something really horrible about her comes out. And the WikiLeaks have been embarrassing. I mean, to have her campaign chair calling Bernie Sanders a doofus. I mean, but I think to most people it's relatively harmless. It's what they expect. Something would have to come out that's just enormous about her. I don't see how he can, in a positive way, go ahead of her. He would have to capitalize on something really negative about her.
All right. Does she win?
I don't know. You're not going to get it out of me.
Still.
This has been such a strange year.
Does
why?
she win?
Why
If everything stays the same it is today, she would win.
But it's not today.
That's right. It's 19 days
I
from
might
now.
sneak these guys in once more before the election. Tomorrow night, a discussion with Ted Nesi and Carl Waddenston of the EDC on 38 Studios. Like I said, 38 Studios, focus tomorrow night. I hope you join us. Thanks for watching. Good night.